Good evening, this is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Wednesday, March 23rd, 2011. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. By the way, if I don't have your email and you'd like to receive the script of each show, send me your email address to my new email address, which is goldyrant@gmail.com. Last week I did something slightly different, unscripted digressions of two things. One, about my personal healthcare experience, and two, going through the Bill of Rights and looking at Obama's record on it. It was fun. I'm going to keep doing it, but the problem is there is no written record of that. So you may have to watch these things rather than always reading them. You may remember that I've said I hate texting. Well, sometimes a written word is easier to say than a spoken word. Learned that one today. Here's a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about our newest war, the war in the 1.8 million barrel producing country, Libya. I'm going to talk about the nuclear problem in Japan and its effect on the commons, as well as how the regulations written by the industry itself were insufficient to keep the drinking water safe around the world. Look at the monkey, look at the monkey. March 17th, 2011. The U.S. got the United Nations Security Council to issue a resolution about the 1.8 million barrel per day producing country, and I prefer this message phrase to the actual name of the country. And they were allowed to use all force necessary. On Judge Napolitano's Freedom Watch March 18, 2011, Michelle Bachmann was reluctant about supporting any opposition without knowing who those people were. It would be a mistake right now, is what she said. And she's a Tea Partier. On Fox News, Secretary of State Clinton, March 19, 2011, said, if the international community does not act following the UN resolution, it will lose all credibility. Notice how BRIC, B-R-I-C, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the major economic engines in the world today, abstained from the resolution. The former ambassador to the UN for Libya called Gaddafi the devil. We hear phrases like humanitarian crisis, United States interests, humanitarian boots on the ground. On Judge Napolitano, March 21st, 2011, Ron Paul. This is unconstitutional as war has not been declared by Congress, as required by the Constitution. Quotes, why is Congress willing to give up its right to declare war? Where are the American people on this item? And again, this is Ron Paul speaking. Iraq, 8 years later. Afghanistan, 10 years later. We didn't go to Rwanda for humanitarian reasons, so it's obvious that this intervention is about oil. $100 million in hardware rained down on Saturday in cruise missiles. That number, by the way, that $100 million, changed day by day from $1 million per Tomahawk missile to $1.5 million per Tomahawk missile. So that $100 million number is way low, guaranteed. On Judge Napolitano, March 21st, 2011, Dennis Kucinich. Obama did this unilaterally. The White House went to the Arab League, UN, England, and France, NATO, but did not come to the Congress. Apparently, Kucinich mentioned the phrase impeachable offense. I've heard the word impeachment used by a few people. Judge Napolitano versus what I call Obama, he calls him the third term of George W. Bush. I call Obama more of the same. I like the third term of George W. Bush. O'Reilly continues to be a Republican hawk. He complained on March 22nd that Obama waited too long. Gaddafi is a terrorist. He had a few people on his program that said, why now? Wasn't he a terrorist before this? Didn't he kill hundreds due to the Lockerbie Pan Am bombing back in the 90s? On Napolitano on March 22nd, 2011, Huckabee is really running for the presidency, and he's milquetoast. And he's saying that he agrees with Napolitano and Kucinich, and he was surprised that he did, that Obama has exceeded his authority. Napolitano fails in not asking Huckabee about the unconstitutional resolutions for Iraq and Afghanistan and the illegal incursions into Yemen and Pakistan. Why does he not ask Huckabee those questions? Those are the important questions. Would you as president accept an unconstitutional resolution, giving you power that you don't have. Former Ambassador John Bolton on Napolitano said that this is too little, too late. This guy's a crazy hawk, crazy neocon hawk. He said it has the wrong objective, nor are we sure who is going to be commanding this. Bolton, however, agrees that the president does have this power. Napolitano on March 22nd is asking the question, where are the anti-war protesters? There was a Fox News alert March 23rd, 2011. Tomahawk attacks, and the missiles cost now $1.5 million apiece, have ended. And there are no plans to fire any more unless they are needed. There are no plans to fire any more unless they are needed. I love these guys. An article in the Austin American-Statesman dated March 22, 2011 is entitled, U.S. Allies Near Total Control of Skies Over Libya. Yay! The article is a fluff piece, saying what a success that the bombing, with no ground troops, wink wink, nod nod, has been. Let me read you a telling quote from the article. Quotes, at the United Nations, the Security Council rejected a request from Libya for a meeting to discuss the situation. Close quotes. Why would they reject a request to talk? I thought the goal of the intervention, or war, was to keep Gaddafi from killing civilians. Not regime change. Here are some other telling words. Quotes, in Santiago, Chile, Obama reiterated that the United States would soon turn over full responsibility to the Allies to maintain the no-fly zone. He also sought to distinguish the stated goals of the UN-authorized military operation protecting Libyan civilians, establishing a no-fly zone and forcing Gaddafi's withdrawal from the cities with his own administration's demand, not including the UN resolution that Gaddafi had to leave office. It is U.S. policy that Gaddafi needs to go, Obama said at a news conference in Chile. It is U.S. policy that Gaddafi needs to go. Continuing on the connection of corporate imperialism today in the Middle East and American imperialism in South and Central America, there was an article in the Austin American-Statesman dated March 22, 2011 entitled, Obama lauds Chile's rise from Pinochet era to democracy. Quotes, in a speech Monday, Obama invoked Chile's rise from the Pinochet era to a democracy. A day earlier in Brazil, Obama said its transition could be a model for countries in the Middle East and North Africa, where a historic wave of popular uprising has surprised authoritarian governments in that region and the Obama administration itself. Close quotes. You may remember my Kissinger rant that talked about American imperialism during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which included Vietnam as well. In those countries that we supported, there were assassinations, torture, and disappearances with the tacit support of the United States, all in the name of fighting communism. I equated that time with now in the Middle East, where we have supported brutal dictators that have used assassination, torture, and disappearances, all in the name of fighting terrorism. Back to the article, quotes. But Obama's praise for democracy has special symbolic value. Chile had elected governments for parts of the 20th century, but the United States later provided support for the government of Augusto Pinochet, who ran Chile as a dictatorship from 1974 to 1990. Think about that, and whose regime brutally punished and killed political opponents. Obama, at a news conference with Chilean President Sebastián Piñera before his formal speech, was asked by a Chilean reporter if the U.S. government would aid investigations of the Pinochet era and ask for forgiveness for what it did in those very difficult years in the 70s in Chile. Quotes, any requests that are made by Chile to obtain more information about the past is something that we will certainly and would like to cooperate with, Obama said. I think it's important for us, even as we understand our history and gain clarity about our history, that we're not trapped by our history. That's what Obama said. Let me repeat it. I think it's important, though, for us, even as we understand our history and gain clarity about our history, that we're not trapped by our history. It almost sounds like George Bush, except it's actually grammatically correct. I have to ask, what the F does that mean? People reading this article might be misconstruing what they are seeing, but the similarities are specifically that the United States has supported dictators since the beginning, if it was in the national interest, contrary to our stated goal of democracy for all. We're not surprised by a popular uprising, but this house of cards, meaning the United States, is only surprised by when the uprising happens. An article in the Austin American-Statesman dated March 23, 2011 really gives us the insight that is needed as to the U.S. plans for the Middle East, Central America, and South America. The article is entitled, "Obama Promises Closer Cooperation with Central American Countries." President Barack Obama vowed closer cooperation Tuesday with the Central American nations where U.S. policies on crime, immigration, and other issues have outsized influence on populations here that depend heavily on their giant neighbor to the north and in turn affect U.S. society. The United States will do our part in combating the increasing scourge of drug trafficking, Obama said, standing next to El Salvador's President Mauricio Funes. Obama said $200 million would be spent as part of a new regional security partnership meant to combat drug wars that have led to a spike in murders here and in other Central American countries. So in El Salvador, it is not terrorism or communism, as in the good old days, but drug war. How much of that $200 million is going into elected officials' pockets in that country? How much of that $200 million is going directly into the pockets of those from the United States that produce arms and drones, since drones seems to be the thing that we want people to buy? Certainly in Mexico, and now in Central and South America. Continuing on to prior undeclared illegal wars and their devastating effect on world opinion. There was an article in the Austin American-Statesman dated March 18, 2011 entitled, "Pakistani Military Chief Condemns U.S. Airstrike." American drones attacked a village in Pakistan. Quotes, "Several missiles fired from American drone aircraft Thursday struck a meeting of local people in northwest Pakistan who had gathered with Taliban mediators to settle a dispute over a chromite mine. The attack, a Pakistani intelligence official said, killed 26 of 32 people present. Some of them Taliban fighters, but mostly elders and local people not attached to the militants. The civilian death toll appeared to be among the worst in the scores of strikes carried out recently in Pakistan's tribal areas by the CIA, which runs the drones. Local residents and media reports said as many as 40 people had been killed, though the intelligence official disputed that number. Since one of my main jobs here is to look at messaging, I will admit that it would always be in the best interest of, in this case, the Taliban, to always say that innocent civilians were killed. It is in everyone's interest who are being bombed by a foreign power to say that civilians have been killed. It was said in Iraq, even though 150,000 were actually killed. Civilians. However, contrary to Libya, where there's a UN resolution, in Pakistan, there's not even a UN resolution. Has the Congress declared war? No. Has the Congress offered up an unconstitutional resolution ceding its power to declare war to the president? No, not even that. Again, continuing on to prior undeclared wars and their devastating effect on world opinion. Wow, it's like deja vu all over again. There was an article in the Austin American-Statesman dated March 22, 2011 entitled, "Photos Threaten the U.S.-Afghanistan Relationship." Let me read a little bit. The release of explicit photographs of U.S. soldiers apparently engaged in atrocities against Afghan civilians threatens to ignite tensions between the Afghan and U.S. governments and provide fodder for the Taliban's efforts to persuade Afghans that the foreign troops fighting here are a malevolent force, a bad force. So in this case, there are actual photos of civilians being killed, not just reports of it, as in the Pakistan drone case above. So there's no messaging in this one. Why do they hate our freedoms? And this is in another undeclared war country. Although the U.S. Congress did cede its authority to declare war unconstitutionally to the President George W. Bush following the September 11th attacks. Let me read you the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, quotes, "The Congress shall have the power to declare war." Please notice that the word war is capitalized. In the legal world, when a non-proper noun is capitalized, it is called a defined term. A defined term is not just the word, but can include any number of other things. Now, I say, anecdotally, that the defined term war should include interventions, support, advisors, humanitarian crises, genocide, the sales of any arms and ammunition of any kind, the use of contractors, Blackwater, money or goods that are used to purchase any of the foregoing. That's my first stab at what that word war actually means in the Constitution. When the founders were drafting the Constitution, most, if not all of those terms, didn't even exist. I guarantee you that since they were worried about the imperial presidency of King George III, who might enter a war due to a card game or a fight over a girl, they would have included any of those. They would have included all of those other items. And if they had, it would have made Korea, the Bay of Pigs, Vietnam, Grenada, Nicaragua, support for Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan against the Russians, Somalia, Kosovo, Clinton's Afghanistan bombings in 1998, the no-fly zone in Iraq, the original Iraq War, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Bahrain, Somalia again, Mexico's drug war run by the U.S., and of course, Libya. Let me give you my opinion on all of this. As I was talking to a friend from New York today, and he asked me my actual opinion on Libya. Now, I know I talked about it a bit last week, and it's current. I was at the Y today, and I was asking a few friends, when is the protest? And one of the friends responded back, was it a protest over the sonogram bill in the Texas legislature? I was like, no, over the war. And he just kind of stared at me. He's a Democrat. So let's just kind of go through what I told my friend in the Northeast. I said that everything that we're seeing between now and the election in 2012 is look at the monkey. Look at the monkey. Look at the monkey over here. If we look at the monkey over here, we're not looking at the economy. We're not looking at the nuclear crisis. We're not looking at Obamacare even. Obama is a political animal. He is running for president. He has to be politically a strong president. Now, I know that you can watch on Fox News that they are all complaining about Obama being slow, Obama not being a leader, but that this was important. O'Reilly, this is important. He's a terrorist. We must intervene. Why can't we actually have a conversation about what this is about? I mean, at least it would be an honest conversation. This country has oil. They also have a humanitarian crisis in that there's a nutcase that's killing civilians. Since it has oil, we're going to go in there and at least secure the supply of oil. Fox News is dumbly saying we don't actually have an interest in the Libyan oil because it gets sold to Europe. All oil is the same. I know there's different grades of it, but it's adjusted by price. So if you take out 1.8 million barrels per day, it affects everybody. They fear him blowing up the fields. That's why we went in. Say it. Now, I'm pretty bothered by the cost, because the cost argument was made in Iraq as well. It wouldn't cost anything. We'd use their oil. Things cost $3 trillion. Afghanistan's been like $1.5 trillion. I like to just use an argument that this is stupid from a fiscal perspective, from a constitutional conservative perspective, from a Tea Party perspective. It's the same argument that you can use with capital punishment. It's more expensive to put somebody to death, than to put them in jail for life. So we don't have to argue about whether or not we're executing innocent people with capital punishment. Similarly, In this one, we don't have the money. I mean, this is corporate imperialism at its worst. At its worst. And it's in line with Obama's re-election. This is Halliburton's war. This is the producers of the Tomahawk missiles war. This is the subcontractors that are over there. The contractors, the Blackwaters. Where is the Tea Party? I mean, there's Ron Paul and Rand Paul. Michelle Bachmann was waffling. I guess she's a Tea Partier. Tea Party should be leading the protests, the anti-war protests, purely because of money and non-intervention. Why are we doing this? We do not have the money. I've been watching these shows, and they have Democratic pundits on there, and they're all saying this is a justified intervention. Democrats, you disgust me. You are disgusting me. I am disgusted. Where are the anti-war activists that were there in 2003 on the Congress Avenue Bridge? That were there in 2001 after Afghanistan was invaded? It's an alignment. The Tea Party is aligned with the anti-war activists of the Democrats. Where are the protests? They're not even here in Austin. This is a blue dot. I mean, I'm not angry at people who are just trying to put food on their table. I do get a little angry at them. I'm angry at the people that are actually intellectual activists, Tea Partiers talking about the Constitution, Tea Partiers that read the Constitution, Democratic anti-war activists that it turns out all they hated was Bush. They love Obama. If Obama does it, it's right. This is disgusting. I am disgusted. I want to go out there for money purposes. God. All right. Moving on to nuclear power. There was an excellent op-ed in the February 15th, 2011 Austin American Statesman written by Juan Garza of NRG Energy entitled, "Nuclear Power Needs to be in Austin's Clean Energy Mix." This was February 15th, 2011. The title of the op-ed is disturbing for reasons I will not explain, except repeating the word clean. Nuclear power needs to be in Austin's clean energy mix. Let me read something. Quotes, "As president of advanced technology at NRG Energy," that's so cute, NRG Energy, "I am in a position to offer a series of transactions that could have very beneficial effects for our city by reducing our carbon footprint without increasing our rates, close quotes. He's trying to get Austin to sell him some coal generating capacity in a certain power plant and get Austin to buy more capacity from the South Texas nuclear project, where there's already a nuclear plant. It's on the Gulf. It's in the tsunami zone. Quotes, "To maintain low customer rates and a smaller carbon footprint, additional nuclear power through a power purchase agreement should be in the Austin Energy Clean Energy Mix," close quotes. I wonder how that deal is going right now. I can only smile. Quotes, "High radiation levels found in Tokyo's tap water." That came across the screen this morning on Fox News. There was then a run on bottled water. For those of you that are selling properties, and I'm not trying to be Glenn Beck here, okay, and those of you that know me and have heard me opine on selling properties, is this September 10th, 2001 or September 10th, 2008 pre-Lehman Brothers collapse all over again? My point is, if you're selling properties, we always want to act like it's September 10th. On September 11th, 40,000 transactions never closed because they go, we'll wait till tomorrow. Well, there's a run on water in Japan right now. Let me give you some interesting talk from today's New York Times. Close quotes. Tokyo says that radiation in water puts infants at risk. Now, I'm going to trust what any government tells me in a panic situation. All right, I'm going to read from the article. I have to. Radioactive iodine detected in the capital's water supply, in Tokyo's water supply, spurred a warning for infants on Wednesday, and the government issued a stark new estimate about the cost of rebuilding from the earthquake and tsunami that slammed into the northeast of Japan this month. Ie Yoshida, head of the water purification for the Tokyo Water Department, said at a televised news conference that infants in Tokyo and surrounding areas should not drink tap water. He said iodine 131 should not drink it. He said iodine 131 had been detected in water samples at a level of 210 becquerels per liter, about a quart. The recommended limit for infants is 100, so that's twice what it should be. For adults, the recommended limit is 300, so it's under the recommended limit for adults. The measurement unit is named for Henry Becquerel, one of the discoverers of radioactivity. The announcement added to the growing anxiety about public safety posed by the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, which was severely damaged by the March 11th earthquake and tsunami, and it prompted a run on bottled water at stores in Tokyo. Prime Minister Naoto Kan said earlier Wednesday that the public should avoid additional farm produce from areas near the power station because of contamination, according to the Japanese news media. How do you know where the food is from? This is actually getting uglier, by the way. The health ministry said in a statement that it was unlikely that there would be negative consequences to infants who did drink the water, but that it should be avoided if possible and not be used to make infant formula. The warning applied to the 23 wards of Tokyo, as well as the towns of Mitaka, Tama, Masuchino, Mashida, and Inagi to the west of the city. Quotes, "It's unfortunate, but the radiation is clearly being carried on the air from the Fukushima plant," said Yukio Edana, the chief cabinet secretary. "Because it's raining, it's possible that a lot of places will be affected. Even if people consume the water a few times, there should be no long-term ill effects." Should be. I would hope. Did you turn off your coffee maker? I'm sure I did. That means I'm sure I didn't. There should be no long-term ill effects. There had been frequent rain in recent days, and the watershed for Tokyo's tap water lies almost entirely to the north and northeast of the city. The nuclear plant is about 140 miles to the north. Think Indian River power plant on the Hudson River in New York. That one's like 100 miles to the north, on the Hudson River. The Japanese daily Asahi Shimbun cited the health ministry as saying that drinking the water would hurt neither a pregnant woman nor her fetus, and that it was safe for bathing and other everyday activities. Like gargling, I guess. But experts say that pregnant women, nursing mothers, and fetuses, as well as children, face the greatest danger from radioactive iodine, which is taken in by the thyroid gland and can cause thyroid cancer. Children are at much higher risk than adults because they are growing, and their thyroid glands are more active and in need of iodine. In addition, the gland is smaller in children than in adults, so there is less tissue to share the radiation, and a given amount of iodine 131 will deliver a higher dose of radiation to the thyroid and potentially do more harm in a child. The compound potassium iodide can protect the thyroid by saturating it with normal iodine, so it will have no need to soak up the radioactive form. People in Japan have been advised to take it. Scientists say that if it is in short supply and must be rationed, the pills should go first to pregnant women and children. I'm sure that's what the people in California who did their runs on that stuff were thinking, that it's going to pregnant women and children. The accident in Chernobyl caused an epidemic of thyroid cancer, 6,000 cases so far, in people who were exposed as children. The risk in that group has not decreased over time, and many more cases are expected. The culprit was milk produced by cows that had grazed on grass that was heavily carpeted by fallout. The epidemic could probably have been prevented if people in the region had been told not to drink milk, and if they had been given potassium iodide. After the announcement Wednesday at the Lawson's convenience store in Tsukuchi neighborhood of central Tokyo, the shelves were about half stocked with water, but a clerk had said he had just restocked them an hour before. People came in and cleared us out in the first hour after the announcement, he said, saying he didn't want to be identified because he didn't want to anger his boss. They were taking 20 or 30 bottles at a time. Around the corner at the AM/PM convenience store, the bottled water section of the shelves was bare, but for 9 half-liter bottles of sparkling lemon-flavored water. You may remember that Fox and the Republican Party were jumping on the bandwagon at the beginning of the crisis that the anti-nuclear activists would use this as an example of bad nuclear. Now let's go through the theories of the commons and the structural regulatory defect that puts all of these Japanese at risk and puts us Americans at risk as well. Remember what the commons is. The commons is air, land, and water. And what we try and do is come up with a system starting from nothing that shows that our government needs to do some regulating. The tragedy of the commons is that people use the commons if it is not regulated and they spoil it because it's in their best economic interest to push all the costs of cleaning up the commons to everyone else and to privatize their profits. It's called the commonized costs, privatized profits game. Air, land, and water cannot be protected by private industry. They won't. We don't want them to. It is up to us to protect those items. Air, land, and water. We went through BP, the BP oil gusher, and through that analysis, I came up with what looked to me to be a structural regulatory defect. And that was the oil companies, in that case, wrote the regulations. And they wrote the regulations because they give money to the politicians that ride herd on the regulators. Legally, through the Citizens United case, unlimited advertising, political advertising can be paid for by corporations. It's a part of free speech, the Supreme Court said. I've come up with a constitutional amendment to remedy this. But until that is passed, our air, land, and water are always at risk because the regulated write the regulations. The regulated have disproportionate power. They also have disproportionate power over the media through their media buys. Legally. Remember, the commons is air, land, and water. And only the government can regulate it. Well, let's look at the nuclear industry. Nuclear industry, a lot of the nuclear power plants were built by Brown and Root. Brown and Root was bought by Halliburton. I ask you, does Halliburton have disproportionate power? Sure appears that they do. I read you that article. We really hadn't had an accident since Chernobyl. It was a killer accident. You had Fox jumping on the bandwagon before the crisis got worse, saying, oh, the anti-nuclear activists are going to use this as a reason to say that nuclear is bad. Well, nuclear is bad. There's irreparable harm when there is a spill. But just think, there's a run on water. There is no clean water. That's a September 11th event. If that happened in this country, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine the economic devastation. How about there's a plume floating over Japan. It's floating over the watershed, and then it's raining. You will never know what's contaminated or what isn't. You'll have to buy your own Geiger counter or whatever they use now. We have to be super diligent. The regulated write the regulations. I actually don't have an answer for you right now on what we do prior to a constitutional amendment to take care of that power. The only thing we can do is look at times when we and our interests in properly regulating an industry and properly regulating the commons so that costs don't get pushed off on us are aligned with an event that justifies the regulation. That's the only time. The BP oil gusher, We could have imposed new regulations. We didn't. And when I say we, I mean the people. And I mean the Tea Party. Only ones with energy. Democrats are dead. A buddy of mine was just at a meeting of the Democratic Party in Travis County. They were crying. He said they were literally crying. We have to use alignments when they happen. A nuclear crisis is a time of alignment. No nuclear. You know why no nuclear? Because we cannot trust the regulations. We can't trust the regulators. Cannot. And it's irreparable harm if there's a crack. If there's a tsunami that runs over the South Texas nuclear plant. Gulf of Mexico. We have an earthquake down there. They can't protect against that. It can't be done. I'll just say that. Because the regulations were not written by me. They're written by the people that are trying to get the deal done and get the subsidies to build the plant. All right, I'm going to move on. Here's something else from an article entitled "Freedom's Just a Word" in an issue of the Texas Observer. It was the March 11th, I believe. This is a telling quote regarding the substantial cuts facing the state of Texas and the stupidity of cutting programs that save the taxpayers money. Specifically, the programs that divert low-level drug offenders to treatment rather than jail. A huge money saver. Quotes, "This year, when the House and the Senate issued their proposed cuts to the Department of Criminal Justice at the start of the current legislative session, they cut the biggest chunk out of the diversion programs. If judges can't sentence people to programs because of long waiting lists, they're likely to send them to prison. With the state facing a $27 billion shortfall, the proposed cuts are not always logical. It's politically easier to end a treatment program than shut down a prison. So even though you're not going to save any money, you're going to say that you're saving money. This is where the actual Tea Partiers, as opposed to me and my theoretical Tea Partiers, break down. Where are they? Just having as your mantra, cut, 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 doesn't work. Especially when it costs us more money following your cuts. Like last week I was talking about the poison control centers. We save money when somebody can just call up and they go drink a bunch of milk and stick your finger down your throat. Or don't drink a bunch of milk because that'll make the poison worse. Go to the hospital. Tea Partiers, snap out of it. There are things the government has to do. They're not things the free market can or will do. They're not inkjet printers. Prisons, for example. All you do by privatizing prisons, by the way, this is the argument I get from some friends, is they add the cost of their profit onto it. And then they decrease the services to the prisoners. Food. Remember the famous thing from Reagan that ketchup is a vegetable? I think it was Reagan, or it was George Bush Sr. They did the same thing in the prisons here. Their vegetable today is ketchup. And then that huge company that builds prisons gets all their profits. And we get lawsuits. We get the lawsuits. Classic. Here's another example of regulations that maybe help and save us money. The FDA is now warning consumers about some foods from Japan. Is this a type of regulation that is okay? Is this a type of regulation spending money on regulating that works? Does this type of regulation cost less than the cost of cancer that radiation-laden foods create in healthcare costs? And who is asking these questions? No one. No one. No one is asking these questions. Some Democrats are asking, not for the right reasons. We don't want to cut programs to the poor. They don't want to use the fiscal argument because they're not constitutional conservatives, they're not Tea Partiers. They don't want to be known as somebody who wants to cut programs. Idiots. I'm going to read a couple of emails for fun, got from some fans. I received an email from an old friend in Connecticut, March 2nd, 2011, following that day's rant. Goldie, great tonight, but seriously, I think this is when I said that I grew up rich. But seriously, some revisionist history, dude. I'm sorry to disagree, but you did not grow up wealthy. You grew up among those who were. Your first car, which was your mom's, was a effing Pacer. Rich used a push mower, and although years later the homes we lived in would sell for ridiculous money, they were to the locals Ben Menegon slums, built fast and prefab in the reconstituted swamps. Remember the storms that would deposit several feet of water in your living room? Incontinent truth? Rich made his money because he sold his reinsurance business for a premium, which, give him credit, he had the foresight to see would one day be a valuable practice. Okay, sure, you had your college paid for, thanks Carpet Dad, and you spent your grad bonus on a black BMW that you thought might get you some sex. It didn't. You think, I think, that I grew up rich? Hang on. Hell no. My dad made virtually all of his saved money by buying Greenwich real estate right. Pure coincidence. He had 5 kids. That was expensive. Charge accounts, Buds, Stewarts, etc. Due to no parents. That was expensive. We belonged to Innis long before you did. Seriously, do you think I grew up rich? Strictly middle class. You want rich? That wasn't even Groons or B. They had money for sure, but not wealth. But rich? Try Leslie W. Try Leslie A. Think Benny. Compared to these people, we were the middle class of Greenwich. But hey, compare us to Central Texas. 1,200-foot, 3-bedroom ranch, no AC, dogs live under the front porch. Better catch a fish if you want to eat. Well then, yes, we were rich. Fine. You were in fact fortunate to be brought up in a community of wacky souls who had lots of kids with varying degrees of imagination. There were people who tested you, who challenged you, and you were given, but not granted, the simple opportunity to gain for yourself some insights into things that would eventually encourage your desire to learn, and even more important, to think. But here's the rub. You would not be where you are today in virtually every way if you did not break your leg, grow tired of Lighthouse Lane, and take an extended trip to visit me in the Pike House in Dallas. Where would you be if you went to Amherst? Have you ever considered it? No. I know this. Once you got your eyes wrapped around the limitless number of Texas 6-foot blondes without much in the way of moral boundaries, it was Texas for you all the way. Well, Rice and Houston was your gateway. UT and Austin became your true home, has been ever since. I doubt you will ever leave. Rich? Just your exposure, your relationships, and your experience, and in true Greenwich fashion, a few parcels of appreciating real estate. Thanks for the entertainment. Keep watching Fox, but careful. Soon they might be watching you. Northeastern non-elite. Here's another one. This is from my Houston continuing fan on March 9th, 2011. Hey, Goldie, no rant this week, huh? You deserve a week off. Enjoy. But know that we notice, we miss it. We look forward to the next one. I'm actually surprised that you've held my interest this long, because not much does, and you're an old friend, but come on, an hour a week? The difference is that your rants are thoughtful, and that's a breath of fresh air. He goes through some specifics. Defense of marriage from last week. I wonder if the GOP was mum on the defense of marriage because they've lost. Don't ask, don't tell is gone, and Holder is probably right that defense of marriage is unconstitutional. The recent CPAC had a significant gay presence, enough that the family values people boycotted. Thank you for that info. I didn't know that. First Amendment. Supreme Court ruled 8-1 that a-holes can picket soldiers' funerals with hate speech. I call that a win for freedom and applaud Director Kevin Smith's proper reaction of counter-protesting with irony and mockery. Thor hates straights. I do feel sorry for the family of those soldiers having to see that stuff. I do too. Look at the monkey. I'm always amazed at how effectively the Karl Rove types can take a weakness for Republicans and turn it around onto Democrats. The latest example is this attack on unions as a response to the fiscal crisis, deflecting criticism from banks and Wall Street. Jon Stewart did a great juxtaposition attack against mainly Fox commentators on this, as they defended bankers and their bonuses while attacking teachers and their benefits. You say, look at the monkey. In this context, but I'm saying it's like, look at the other monkey. Other examples of this. John McCain was born in Panama, raising a legitimate constitutional question about his candidacy. Spin it around. Obama wasn't born in Hawaii. Bush and Cheney avoided Vietnam. Spin it around. Kerry wasn't a real war hero. Bush and company caught sending innocent people to Egypt for torture. Spin it around. Obama pals around with terrorists. It's almost so common that when they attack Democrats with innuendo, you can use that as a clue that there's a genuine GOP weakness behind it. Very nice. Very nice, buddy. All right, I'm waiting for Superman. An engaging film, but with a flawed premise. Charter schools, magnet schools, etc. don't succeed because they have a better way to teach and because our other schools suck. Because teachers suck. These special schools succeed because they, one, offer hope to parents of a better education for the kids, and two, are highly competitive to get into, meaning they can handpick the best students to make their experiment a success. This is the real message in that film. Only highly motivated families get their kids into those schools. If it was a completely random lottery, we would actually learn which method is most effective. Later, Scooter. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this forum conversation, but not necessarily the content of this conversation. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbessis, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. She can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. www.ticoadventurerlodge.com, a small hotel in Samara, Costa Rica. CNC Surf School in Samara, www.cncsurfsamara.webs.com. La Vela Latina, a great sunset bar and restaurant in Samara. Ambar Tequila at www.santosspirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool little hotel in Samara, www.villablancasamara.com, and of course, the Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. I also want to thank the two people that I talked with today before lunch, which solidified my views on Libya. Thanks for coming out. We'll talk to you soon.